This should be our last video and our last discussion of the American Revolution. This is going to conclude our lesson on this and therefore conclude our project here. So we're going to talk about first some of the foreign soldiers and the Revolution. The three big names that we're going to talk about are the Marquis de Lafayette, the Baron von Steuben, and Casimir Pulaski. I'm sure my Polish friends would laugh at my pronunciation of Mr. Pulaski's last name. So let's first, these are members of foreign militaries who become involved in the American Revolution. And they're here to assist the American cause, primarily because they believe in it. And these are the three most important officers who help us fight the British. So let's first talk about the Marquis de Lafayette. He is a French nobleman. He's appointed as Major General of the Continental Army by Congress, and Lafayette is going to serve with Washington at Valley Forge. He's later going to become an aide-de-camp and a close friend of Washington, and even after the war, they're going to continue to be close confidants. Lafayette is also going to help convince the French government to give more aid to the American cause. Interesting fact about Lafayette, he's going to go back to France after the American Revolution. He's going to aid the French in fighting their revolution against their government. At one point in his life, he's offered to be dictator. He's offered the title of dictator of France, to which he declines in favor of King Philippe of France. And so he's just an interesting character who leads a very full, very rich life. And he's the only Frenchman buried in France who not only has soil from Bunker Hill sprinkled on top of his grave, but he also has an American flag that flies above his grave. And this flag will continue to fly above his grave in France throughout conflicts in World War I and World War II. The Baron von Steuben. He was a Prussian drill master, and for whatever reasons, he loses his commission in the Prussian army. No one really knows why. There's some circumstances that are kind of discussed, but nothing that we know for sure. So he finds his way to France, and in France, he gets a letter from Benjamin Franklin to Washington, and Benjamin Franklin writes about what a great guy, and he kind of overstates the fact of Baron von Steuben and who he was and his commission in the Prussian army. Washington likes this guy, and he offers him a position in the army. And so von Steuben is going to help teach the American forces to march more effectively, as well as a way to better load and fire their weapons. And in the matter of warfare that they have at this time, this is increasingly important, because when you're facing each other on the battlefield and you don't have anything to hide behind, you just have the military on the other side of the field, one of the key pieces in securing victory will be your ability to rapidly load your gun and fire. Von Steuben teaches the American soldiers how to do that. He's also going to teach them how to make better use of the bayonet, which is going to help them win several important battles against these British forces. And probably the least known, Pulaski. He's known as the father of the American cavalry. He comes from Poland to train American forces to be skilled soldiers on horseback. And he's named the commander of the horse by Continental Congress, and he's going to frequently use his own personal finances to equip his men. He's wounded in a cavalry charge during the siege of Savannah in 1779, and he doesn't regain consciousness from that, and he dies 2 days later in 1779. Congress is going to later grant him honorary U.S. citizenship. He's been the subject of novels, and a lot has been written about Mr. Pulaski. So let's talk about the battles on the frontier. Remember, the frontier is the edge of settlement. So past this point, there's no settlement. So what was happening on the frontier? Although most of the fighting is going to occur in the original 13 states, this frontier area between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River is going to be of strategic importance. 3 major battles are going to be fought in what will eventually become Illinois and Indiana. Since settlers in the Kentucky region had been harassed by Indians on a regular basis, British General Henry Hamilton is going to encourage Indians to do this. And they're going to pay for the settler scouts. So they're going to say, hey, we'll give you a certain amount of money if you can collect X number of colonist scouts. And so it's going to encourage the Indians to attack the colonists there in the frontier. And since Kentucky was part of Virginia at the time, Kentucky settlers are going to ask the Virginia governor, who was Patrick Henry at the time, to approve military action to end the raids. George Rogers Clark, a Virginia military officer living in Kentucky, is going to be given command of a force to attack British forts at Kaskaskia, Cahokia, and Vincennes. Hoping to command a force of 500 men, Clark could only gather about 125 soldiers for the campaign. And in marching in freezing temperatures across flooded land, Clark is going to take the forts in 1778 and 1779. Kentucky is going to remain in American control for the rest of the war. So George Rogers Clark is extremely instrumental in securing that for the Americans. As a result of Clark's victories, the British gave what became known as the Northwest Territory to America in the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, which ends the American Revolution. So under the terms of the Northwest Ordinance passed by Congress in 1787, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the Articles of Confederation, these territories are going to later become the states of Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. Let's talk a little bit about this guy. Very interesting guy, Benedict Arnold. Most Americans equate his name with the word traitor. And he served with a great deal of bravery and success as a brigadier general in major battles, including Saratoga. But he always feels unappreciated. And he feels betrayed by Congress and other officers when he doesn't get the recognition for what he sees as his victories and his being very instrumental in securing the victories at certain battles. So prior to Saratoga, Arnold had sided with General Philip Schuyler in Schuyler's ongoing feud with fellow General Horatio Gates. And as a result, Gates purposely withheld credit for Arnold's actions in his reports after Saratoga. So you got a little bit of drama going on between these guys. So moreover, Arnold is going to receive a reprimand for financial improprieties, not being very good with finances, and it alleges to have occurred while he was military commander of Philadelphia a few years earlier. Arnold's going to be very angry about this. He's going to be angry about this, being passed over for what he sees as an earned promotion and being officially reprimanded. He is going to eventually defect to the British side. For his offer of the American fort at West Point, to which he tells the British, I will deliver you the West Point, okay, which is where we trained our military officers. Arnold is going to be promised a commission in the British Army. So the British say, if you can deliver us West Point, we'll make you a British Army officer. And they'll also agree to pay him about 10,000 pounds. Arnold negotiates the terms of treason with Major John Andre, a chief intelligence officer of the British General Sir Henry Clinton. But the plan is going to fall apart because Andre is going to be captured. He's going to be tried as a spy, and he's going to be executed. So Arnold's going to defect to the British side. They're going to reward him with land in Canada, military pensions for him and his family, and a military commission as an officer. And while the British reward Arnold, they're never going to trust him because, remember, this guy betrayed his country first, and they're never going to give him important military command that he seeks. He just wants recognition for what he feels like he's done, and he's never really going to get that. He's going to settle in London, then Canada, then London again, where he's going to be a failure in the shipping business, and he's going to die virtually an unknown name in 1801. The Americans will remember him as being a traitor. So what were the major southern battles? Well, the British are going to change their strategy to focus on the southern region. So let's talk about that. As the war begins to enter its fourth year, the British are going to change their strategy. Rather than fighting large battles in the north, they're going to focus more of their ground troops and naval power in the south. And the British hope that a large loyal population there are going to join forces with them and turn the tide of the war. And they had a lot of reason to believe that, because most of the support for the American Revolution is going to come from those New England colonies and that idea of freedom that was built in those New England colonies. Also, New England's going to be the source of most of the conflict. If you remember the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, all of them are taking place in the extreme Northeast. And so it kind of segregates the South from that conflict, to which they don't have much vested interest. But as the British move south, that's going to change that. The British did enjoy a fair amount of success in South Carolina and Georgia, capturing major cities of Savannah and Charleston. In the victory of Charleston, the British captured more than 3,000 American soldiers. And after that victory, the British divide their forces, leaving General Cornwallis and approximately 8,000 men to fight the Americans. Most of the Redcoats' harsh treatment of civilians and captured soldiers in South Carolina and Georgia are going to lead many of these loyalists to convert to the Patriot cause. So it's going to have the exact opposite effect that they wanted and they desired. And if you've seen the movie The Patriot, this is a perfect example of that. A guy who starts off not wanting to fight, not wanting to be involved in this conflict, and he's pulled into it by the actions of the British against his family. So, in addition, American forces, led by this guy over here, Francis Marion, he's a patriot, also known as a swamp fox. They're going to continue to make these hit-and-run attacks. We also call these guerrilla warfare on the British. And the Spanish forces are also going to win battles against the British in Florida and capture the ports of Pensacola and Mobile in Alabama. So, General Horatio Gates, commanding the army of militia units at Camden, are going to be defeated by British General Cornwallis, partly because he decides unwisely to divide his forces. Gates does make some very severe, some really bad decisions during the course of the war, which is another reason why Benedict Arnold doesn't feel like he should be taking command from this guy who can't seem to win a battle, who can't seem to get his stuff together. And Gates makes some bad decisions here in the South. He's going to be replaced by a guy named Nathaniel Greene. Nathaniel Greene is going to take his army, and knowing that he's facing a much larger, better trained army in the British, he's going to use these guerrilla warfare, these tactics, in order to kind of wear down the British, to harass them, and make his army that he has a little bit more effective. So, this is one of the good decisions by the Continental Congress at this time. The Patriots are going to win under Nathaniel Greene major battles at Kings Mountain and later Cowles Pens. So let's talk about the battle that ends the war, so to speak. Let's talk about Yorktown. After British defeats in South Carolina, Cornwallis is going to move his army to Virginia. And remember, they had taken South Carolina, they had taken Georgia, they had taken North Carolina, but once Nathaniel Greene gets that commission, he's going to basically reduce their territory in the South to Charleston and Savannah. And Cornwallis doesn't see a reason to stay there and fight, so he moves his army north. He's going to move his army north to Virginia, ordered by Clinton to establish a base at Yorktown. And Cornwallis puts his forces in a position that are going to be hard to defend. And the French and Patriot forces are going to look to take advantage of this by surrounding Cornwallis' forces and laying siege to this position. Washington and French Admiral de Grasse and commander of the French land forces, the Comte de Rochambeau, are going to surround the British with more than 17,000 veteran troops, and they're going to close off the Chesapeake Bay. Shutting off Cornwallis' escape route, Cornwallis is going to hold out until October of 1781. At this point, no longer able to mount an attack against the Americans, he is going to ask for terms of surrender. On October 19th, Cornwallis will surrender his army of nearly 7,000 men to General Washington. While this ends up taking nearly 2 years to negotiate a peace treaty between the British and the Americans, Yorktown is going to mark the end of the shooting war, so to speak, that part of the American Revolution, and the political side of it is going to be ironed out over in Europe. Haym Solomon was a broker who became an agent of the French consul and a paymaster for the French forces in North America. He's going to be called upon by George Washington to help raise funds for his war chest. And Solomon negotiates many sales from France and the Dutch Republic supporting the war effort. He's able to raise the $20,000 that allowed Washington to conduct the last battle of the Revolution, the Yorktown campaign. And I have some questions I want you to answer in your notes. What influence did foreign soldiers have on the American forces during the Revolutionary War? Who were some of the better known foreign soldiers? What was the importance of the frontier battles in the Revolutionary War, and what major battles took place in the Kentucky Territory? And how did the American and French forces win at Yorktown? What was the importance of